Hey guys, what's happening? Thanks for tuning in, coming back and watching. I appreciate it. Hope your day's going really well. I'm playing around in Luminar Flex today, and I'm still going to do a few videos around Luminar Flex, Luminar 3, that sort of thing, simply because I don't want to overshow Luminar 4. I'm using that a lot, as you can tell from a number of videos I've done already, but I don't want to overshow it simply because it is still in beta, and things may change. So I'm going to continue to do a few more Luminar videos. And I have one for you today, and I've got a photo here. Boom, here it is. And this was a long exposure taken basically during the rain in Salzburg, Austria. So I was there a couple years ago, and it's just a beautiful place. And I saw the river and the castle up there on the hill and all that stuff. And I just knew I had to have a long exposure, and I just like long exposures. And often a rainy day like this, I would, with a long exposure, I would just convert that to a black and white. And I think it would look great as a black and white, but I wanted to do a color version, and I wanted to change it from looking like a overcast kind of blah day and turn it into something a little bit more colorful. So I turned it into that, which is a lot more of a sunset kind of look, and played up some of the things that I have going on in the photo. So let me reset these filters, and then I'll walk you through that. Okay, here we are on the base layer, and with the develop filter, you can see I went from that to that, and as you can see here, temperature and tint were adjusted, a slight decrease in exposure, a fairly good sized bump in contrast, took down highlights and whites, and increased clarity. So I think already the photo looks much better. There's the before and the after. And so next I went to Accent AI, and that was just a little bump there, 25, so not a whole lot. And then I went to tone, and this was an additional contrast and smart tone, taking down shadows and highlights a little bit. So, so far, I feel like we've come a pretty good ways from there to there. And thus far, really all we've been doing is just adjusting the light, which is what, a little bit of color with the temperature and tint here in develop. But then with Accent AI and tone, that was pretty much about balancing the light. And I personally recommend that as a first step, is to balance the light to get it kind of however you want it to look light-wise. I tend to like getting my light kind of balanced and doing the contrast and those sort of things first as a primary step. But, that's just my preference. Next up is color. So a little bit of brilliance and warmth there, and that adds a nice little kick because, as you can tell, those buildings are colorful. Now, in the base photo, you can see kind of the colors there, but obviously they're really washed out, partly because of the overcast light conditions. There's just nothing happening, but also the long exposure, right? It's just kind of bright. So now that I've added contrast, which always makes the color pop, and some of these adjustments that I'm making, I'm starting to really get the color to come through, which is why I did not convert this to a black and white. So next was color balance, which is, as you probably know, one of my favorites. And in here, I went into a slight bump in the warmth on the midtones and the highlights as well. All of those basically just warming up the photo a little bit. So there's the before and the after. Then saturation vibrance. As you can see here, I actually took the saturation down, believe it or not. I felt like, let me turn that off again. I felt like as much as I like it and liked it, as I look at it now, I'm like, God, I kind of like those colors. I felt like it was a little bit much because the color was standing out, I feel like, a whole lot against that kind of gray sky. And so I pulled that back a little bit. And as you probably noticed in the final version of the photo that I showed at the beginning, I kind of went back on that a little bit on subsequent layers. So I'll get to that here in a second. Structure was next, and as you can see, I did negative structure, and of course I painted it into the water, so I can just show you that. I just wanted to smooth it out. Now, as you can see, it was already pretty smooth. Let me close that and turn that off again. You can see it's already really smooth because it's a long exposure. But I wanted to accentuate that even more. And also there's a slight bit of ripple here and there, a tiny bit of texture in the water, and I just wanted to make it as glassy as possible. And that's what I did there. And then I just came back one more time with structure, this time positive, and I just painted it into the buildings and the landmass and the bridge and that sort of stuff. So you can see I was just over here doing this kind of stuff, just painting it in. And, I could do a little bit better job, to be honest. So I'm kind of working on that now, but I don't want to keep you guys waiting while I, work on my mask. But anyway, that's all I did. I just brushed in a little bit more structure, or some positive structure, I should say, because one of the things I like about long exposures, especially in cities like this, you have something that you know, is going to be really solid looking, and then the long exposure with the sky and the water especially are going to be really smooth looking. So I like to kind of accentuate some of the detail and the structure in the structures by using the structure filter. So that's a lot of structure, but I think you get what I'm saying, right? So I was able to, in this layer, go from there to there, and I gotta admit, I really liked it. I was like, wow, I really like it. I think I'm done, except for a couple spots. Like I saw this spot here, so that was my next step. I went and added an erased image layer, got rid of that spot and a couple of others, and since then, I've now noticed there's a spot right there. So I'll need to clean that up, but I'm not gonna do that in this video. It's quite easy to do. You just go to Tools, get your eraser, and then you just paint over it and hit done or whatever. So that's how that works. So at this point, I actually thought I was done, but as I often do with my photos, I sat on it for a little while and just said, well, is there anything else I'd want to do? And I decided, maybe I'll experiment it, right? So what I actually did here is, because I liked the color that I had earlier, I kind of wanted to come back with some color. And one of the ways I like to experiment with color is just going into my presets or looks. And I've got a bunch of packs and that sort of thing. But you know, if you don't have some of your own, I highly recommend that you make some. Just find color looks that you like and start building those into preset or looks. But I've got a bunch of different ones, and they all have some kind of color component because I like color so much. So I just went in and started experimenting. And to be really honest, I have no idea which one it was. I just know it was one of my presets. So that included these filters. So Develop, which, let me turn this layer off. You can see went from that, I don't know how much you can tell, to that. To me, it's a little bit more color, and you can see here a little cooler and a little higher on temperature. So it's getting a little bit more of that pink color. Highlights down, contrast up. Shadows and whites actually both increased here, and clarity up. So a little pop there. I came in with saturation and vibrance, and this is something I often do. I'll take the saturation down, and I'll take the vibrance up. The difference is that saturation is going to saturate every color, and vibrance, to my eye at least, I don't know if this is the official like Luminar definition, but vibrance to me is kind of popping some of the non-dominant colors. So I'll often do that because if you saturate all the colors, you can easily like get a scene like this where, you know, what am I at, -8? So I'll remember that. If I start going this way, you know, actually that looks kind of good, but often you'll get really crazy colors, and I don't want to do over the top. I think it was at -8 or 9, right? So I'll often just use vibrance to give it a little bit of kick without really, you know, oversaturating some of the primary colors. That's kind of how I think of it. Polarizing filter was done here, and that was just a light adjustment, and I just realized something. I got to come back to this, and that is after I did all these adjustments, I added all of these with a luminosity mask. That's why that saturation going to 100 didn't show that much. So I'll show you that in a minute. Also a vignette, right? I just like to tighten focus a little bit, but it's very subtle because it's a luminosity mask. And then a color balance one more time. And again, that's very subtle because it's a luminosity mask. So all of that, let me show you the mask, by the way. So you can go up here to a layer if you weren't aware, and then you can just start masking things. But I did a luminosity mask, which is basically a mask just based on luminosity or light values or exposure values. And I'll click on brush and the eyeball there, so you can see what the luminosity mask looks like. Basically, it's applied more heavily in the areas where there's more red and less heavily in the areas where there's less red. And so basically, it's applied more heavily to the brighter parts of the photo and less heavily to the darker parts of the photo. You can see over here like the shadows and stuff on the bridge and some of this grass and that sort of thing. It almost has no mask at all, which means it's getting almost none of the effect of all of these filters. And all of these filters are being adjusted at one time because I did that on a layer as opposed to on an individual filter. So let me turn off this layer. There's the before. I don't know how well you can tell. I mean, the vignette is slight. Everything's slight because it is a luminosity mask. And I just realized I did something else. I should know these things before I record a video. If you look up here, I also took the opacity down. So with the luminosity mask, with the opacity at 100, still actually looks pretty good. Again, that's because of the luminosity mask, so the intensity of it is reduced. But I had it at about 50. But I'm going to leave it at 100 for now. I kind of like that. But the point was, I went ahead and took the shot because you can often make really dramatic photos out of those kind of days. Now the clouds had no texture, so I wasn't getting any like really good cloud action to sort of add drama to the photo. But the long exposure, I think, really helped. And I just think that accentuates the difference between what you focus on, which is kind of that middle strip of land, and then the nice silky smooth kind of sky and water as sort of a counterbalance. And I kind of like it this way now with the with the opacity at 100. But let me go back to 50 just to show you. I was about there, and I like that too. But I don't know. I just like my color. So that was it for the video. I just kind of wanted to walk through this workflow. I highly recommend that you take the shot, whether the weather permits it or not. If you can manage it, get the shot, because I wasn't sure I was going to get this one. You know, I was getting rained on a little bit and that sort of thing, but you take the shot because you never know. You might have the software and the editing knowledge to come back later and do something with it that you really like. And, you know, 2 or 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't have come up with this as an edit for the photo, but, you know, I like it quite a bit. I wouldn't really even have thought to make it look kind of like a sunset photo, but nonetheless, there's the original, and there it is, looking a bit like a late afternoon, almost sunset, you know, cloudy day kind of shot, and I like it quite a bit. So that was it, my friends. I just wanted to walk through that workflow. I do appreciate it. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up down below. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. And you know, I'll be seeing you really soon with more videos. So thanks for watching. See you soon. Take care, and adios.